Yeah, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
I think just, yeah,
It's on. So there's the mic, and
Oh, awesome.
so now you just flip it around, and
I was bummed I missed our meeting. I just couldn't make it on.
so yeah, it depends on how far you.
Oh, and then I get out of the picture. So do we want to put in like the middle of this table?
You could do it however you'd like.
So that it can cover like.
That's been pretty successful for us.
Does that cover all?
Yeah, depends on.
Do we need to pull the table back?
Last year we upgraded the internet, which I think
Or
is.
someone could just sit there and just pivot it.
Really? What if we? Do you think it's gonna be too small if we pull the table back?
I was thinking that because I thought on this slide deck, and I thought,
You know, yeah, because the best part is the sound.
Yeah.
so, needless to say, you need this thing.
And you can see the screen.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. If we just move it back.
I can hear him, but I can't see him. What's going on?
Can you see the whole screen? Yeah, the other thing I thought is we could do it from an angle, but then one person is getting the.
Doug,
Can I borrow you for a second?
yes.
And Margaret, by the way.
Mark, Phil Wilson. Nice to see you. How are you?
Thanks for coming. Good.
Think of a pole, like a pole on the ground, and an eye. Pole and an eye. Pole eye. That's the easiest way to think of it. You'll never forget that. Because you'll be able to visual now, a pole and an eye.
Ray, you scarred him now.
See if it is, just with the strategy in partnership with
Vertical. Vertical. Think of virtualization. Vertical.
So what do you focus on in terms of what?
Infrastructure as a service, data center environments, so enterprise deployments and cloud solutions. We're based in Virginia, and we help companies migrate into the cloud, manage the cloud, so we're a cloud services provider. And my job is to help manage all of our partnerships and cloud services, as well as our international business. And so we're doing a lot within Europe as well as the Caribbean, so Pan American region, as well as North America. But my job is over the international.
From a personal perspective, that personal touch.
Okay. So I'm from Portland, Oregon, originally.
All the way to the
So yeah, and since I've made it here, I've discovered the boundary law. And I really enjoyed them. So I'm gonna add that. He enjoys boundary waters with family.
Thank you for the willingness to do this.
Last family said, don't go to the state. Midwest, undergraduate.
Oh, there we go. Okay, there we go. And that's what we.
Done it. Sure.
Oh,
Ours
really?
reached to a halt.
Okay.
Hit the first.
Okay. Yeah.
Parking. I enjoyed the real frank answers to the questions. How are you? And he said, oh, I'm CFO of Fast.
And I think,
Good.
Hi.
Okay.
How are you doing? I guess I called it.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
And then after that, you. Okay.
Yeah, that's my day job. Right. Day job is what Gautam.
Okay.
For the vacation.
Thanks for talking to me. Yeah, no problem. And then do you get presentations
power. That's the thing.
Do they not have?
Is there power on the floor?
Yes.
Those interesting little round.
Yeah,
pieces?
and if
Okay.
they're not open, I can grab the key.
That'd be great.
So
Super
we're
secret
gonna-
way.
May want to use
Small users
move that mic so we get everybody settled.
Highly technical tool.
Welcome to the CBRE Conferencing Center. Enter your conference code, followed by the pound or hash sign. Thank you. This is registered. Please enter your name here. After the tone, state your name, followed by the pound or hash sign. Thank you. To start or join the conference, you will now be placed in the conference. To mute your line, press *6. To end it, press #6. After joining the call, to record the conference for those who may miss this call, or for future playback, press *2.
I didn't know. I just sent a link to my friend.
So is this just strictly a virtual meeting?
It's a little both.
The 20 people who signed up.
Okay.
Ah, there you are. You're in the spam filter.
I'm filtered by family.
I'm sure nothing personal.
We would question who we would have.
I tried the method, but I didn't get everything.
Yep. See?
So I have a conflict, I may have to leave it like a little
What?
late, like a huge deal that,
What?
I don't know, I might get on my phone and I'm trying to wrangle it. I almost.
I think you should
let.
let, I think you should let Dan go
Is
first.
this the only quote you want? I've never seen you quote.
You know, I could have gone all day without hearing that.
Yeah, it's great.
Thanks, all right, next time. Hey.
What's good for us? Give you an idea of
Hey, Phil, he wanted it.
Oh, I'm sure.
all the transactions that you so it came with the bank was leading off with this SMAC really if you think about it is hear about it is they're all interrelated. And then base the whole discussion around two main. So one is around how do you see the adoption of SMAC, what is the reality? And so I'll ask each of you about your particular areas and about start with each of your areas where I introduce you. And then after that, we go into this question, what are you seeing about how people use it? And then, we have the association and follow on. And then around three more, how the industry reacts SMAC from the IBM.
You want to kind of turn right over. Is there one on the second floor? There is one on the
How
second
would you
floor.
react?
So you go for the
What is that we actually are doing and how people derive that? So it's about going around. Okay.
Now, who said, give me a characterization of your chemical audience.
So with IAOP, I'm seeing some people who are people who are dealing with outsourcing, procurement, legal, and many different areas. So one of the interesting things about this was the spectrum. And you need to look at the audience. two of them, but
There's someone on there.
it's not just a technology.
Oh my gosh, you
It's
could
not a
bring my
technology
computer down
audience.
Okay,
We don't know
What
who.
are the contracts in this space?
more likely a human resources upbringing rather than a technology upbringing.
There's some from a technology perspective, but human resources, legal,
So if we stand here, then, hey stranger,
Okay,
then this'll, we can present from here too.
Yeah, you can see yourself.
You've got this on 360. Do you want to go?
I almost didn't make it all the way up here, they're giving away food in the lobby,
So if we do this in 360, you should be able to get everybody all the way around, right?
But it's like a short stop, people will never make it all the way, they're standing down there going, where are they?
Thinking that's the line, huh?
Rajiv, where will we, do you want us to all start with, I think, didn't we all kind of do a PowerPoint or something like that?
Yeah,
Or a slide deck?
I just did like less than 10 slides and then.
Same here.
And tried to make it so it's like 5 minutes long.
Yeah, same here. So do we want to do that?
So the way I was originally thinking about it was that it was talk, but if you have slides.
No, if you want to talk, that's fine too.
I mean,
Either
whatever
way.
works for you. If you make the slides, please to go
How old is the
through the
grandbaby?
slides. But keep it to like
It's
5
5
minutes.
tops, yeah.
And
Just turned 9 months.
Oh, yeah.
messages around what's really happening, where people are actually getting value to, the point that you're making, the frank answer, that you can overanalyze source ship, but where are you,
That's your story. and you're
where are
sticking
people
with it,
actually
right?
getting the value of this?
I have trouble remembering my poor daughter's name, so, adding grandchildren is gonna make it much more.
I'm dying to find out what you actually do.
I know.
It's likewise.
Yeah, well, I never talk about my day job, so it's probably, I probably won't today either, so I guess that's a fair statement.
On the road or?
Who was it that, there's a guy I know on Facebook, I knew him, best friends in 2nd grade. All these pictures, all these photos, and it's like, my God, he must be a trust fund baby. No, he's serious. He's on his boat, he's at the beach.
Right.
Finally, we're shooting an advertisement at my dental studio. Ends up he owns a little, he's a oral surgeon. And I said, well, I put on that comment, I said, I'm glad to find out that you actually have a day job. But I think he measures, success somehow as, that's a retro case. I'm
I love
a
it.
retro kind of guy.
I like it a lot. Very cool. Looks like old-time radio or
Yeah, exactly.
front end of a tractor.
That's right.
Who else is going to be on the panel with us?
I think it's, you're part of the
You're part of the panel, and
trifecta
who
or
else is-
quad?
Yeah, there was. Rajiv's partner, but I guess he did not.
So Rajiv will cover it.
I don't think there'll be a S in the equation for social, so. But
There'll be a
think-
Mac.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, twist the bottom.
So how are you doing?
Good, we're cranking day job too. We're planning a marketing analytics event. We're gonna have that at Rural Design, maybe late September.
Okay.
400 people. We're gonna
Graham always does a good job of covering MinneAnalytics.
Yeah, and he's actually chairing the event with Lizzie Wilkins. So that hopefully they'll just take it and run. And then we're gonna do another event. I was able to talk to the guy. There's an article in January on Wired about a guy, mathematician at UCLA, that hacked OkCupid. And then he was able to cluster women into 7 groups, and then he was able to target 2 groups, and then he created all sorts of different profiles to figure out question responses and stuff like that. It's really interesting because
I'll work to get laid.
yeah. Anyway, so but anyway, so he's going to fly in, and then the Social Media Analytics Business Collaborative at Carlson School is going to host an event as we're actually co-branding with them probably. They're going to bring a couple of experts in that have done research in the area. And we're going to call it, I don't know, we'll call it date night or singles night or the target pregnancy prediction model prequel, which is
Wow.
Do you have slides to present?
Yes, I do.
You do, okay. Okay.
Voila. If you just want to hand it to me, I'll plug it in.
Are you logged into the,
The interwebs?
The
No,
what?
no, I am not logged into the WebEx. Oh, you want to be able to show them on screen?
You'll share your screen on the WebEx. Share your desktop.
If you have the link to the WebEx?
No, I don't have a link, but I can get one.
Send it to you.
Send it to me, send it to me.
You should just hand you the ball.
Oh, that's right, the ball.
How do we tell if we have people on here?
See,
Hey, never had it in 2 weeks.
You're pretty close to it, aren't you?
Like 2 minutes, I did it on that, like 4 minutes, I gotta go. It's so close. Are you sending?
I am. What is your email address?
Phil@hyper-iq.
Hey, John,
Let's get water.
do you know everyone here?
No.
You get one. Okay, I'll have to introduce you.
Oh, reaching in. Oh, cool.
He works at events.
I used to at Ameriprise with my leader.
For that event.
He left and I left after.
Yeah.
So what kind of vendors?
And I just rejoined workforce.
Salesforce.
She got one for her event.
I just started working.
Whoever wants to take it.
And I did 1L, correct?
1L, PHIL, @hyper-iq.com.
Okay, I'll be 3.5.
Nothing yet. Wait. As if on cue.
Hey, that's more money for my ski.
So when is that?
Staying home or? Yeah, just the whole thing. When you work for a long time and then also you.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
So different.
right,
You have to go later.
Yeah.
Working.
And you know you're.
Right.
days
Yeah, ours
stalled.
still is. I don't think I've slept my whole night.
Maybe gone
Friday.
Or gone.
Yeah, probably.
One time it's been.
Interesting.
Been gone. So on Friday night.
Says the web page isn't available, but now it is.
That's why I sort of went after this.
We both woke up, like, I talked to her this morning. I think I said 6, me too, but I wasn't sure if it was.
Yeah.
Grant's good.
Yeah. Yeah, and then, you know, if I was able to do that repeatedly, then we can put on
They know that.
Watch
So, yeah, I need to get on that. Is he good? You ever send it out?
No, it's in fact, yeah.
Pull them over in the middle. And then
We're
the
gonna
left.
do a real soft.
Now it's 5:15.
People.
Okay.
Now, do I need to? I'm good.
We haven't heard tonight, I'm like, okay.
I think you should be okay.
All right.
We'll do this, when it's your turn, I'll just switch it over to you.
Got it.
It's your screen then.
Okay.
Yeah.
But he controls it.
For 7.
You don't try to keep up with it.
I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try.
See
Yeah.
that one?
We see a lot of
Friday
this
night.
stuff.
And then she says it's up Friday, 6 a.m. It doesn't matter.
It's a pretty big one as far as like, they have the major players.
Yeah, Express Scripts and St. Jude's, you guys used to go to Prime Therapeutics. Interesting,
Oh, no, that guy. Anybody but that guy.
All healthcare life sciences.
Because I good hours, sir. Maybe my husband should
It's science.
It's been way too long.
Yeah, I know.
So you work in this space at Express Scripts?
That's the new one.
Yeah.
That's what I'm sort of.
Yeah. Just 18 years, 20 years.
I live here yet.
No, I know that.
I'm a COP, I think it's called. Maybe.
So, GPS spent my PJ many years ago. Four of us. We didn't like, I mean.
We'll take a seat to absolutely.
So Google there, Salesforce.
A little bit more people now.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, that's it, might be accurate. Lizzie's. Eight.
No, because he's back in the fire. You wanna let the people know?
Yeah, okay.
Hey Doug, is this on?
Yeah.
No. We're trying to move it here before.
Hi, everybody on the phone. It's Jan Eric AC from the Minnesota chapter. The agenda has 3 to 3:15 Central Time is meet and greet. We've got people here in the room that are just socializing, and we'll start the agenda actually at 3:15. So please hang tight, and we'll get going in just a few minutes. Thank you. Oh, good. I'm glad.
Probably would have heard anything, or hold on a little bit. When I signed up, I didn't.
So how many participants do we have on our webinar?
I think so far we only have 3. We've had
Their building is actually.
RSVPs, so we're hoping that people
Big
come
professional.
connect us as planned.
You remember cars?
Yeah. That's not, common. We get a lot of,
These.
35, 40%.
Oh, these moves?
Because people have to register, they go through the effort to do it, so they normally show up.
Same thing, and we don't charge.
Yeah.
But it used to be, we could, 5 years ago, we get 12 to 15% walking. So it's almost balanced.
Yeah.
And since we use Eventbrite, by the way, I use Eventbrite than anything else.
Yeah.
Because it's much better, broad.
Right.
Registration.
Okay. Hello.
Yeah.
To people say.
I don't know how active they are.
Right.
So then I put on our last name. We're tracking no shows.
Oh, sure, I remember, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Gotcha.
Suddenly all those people cancel.
Yeah.
Oh, did you? I didn't read
Now,
Yeah, well, I mean, this people had come in from Mark. Big meetup in San Francisco.
And where's the location?
It's a very simple business. Find real interesting speakers, make it very and if you can fill the room with well-placed money buys student beer. We're fortunate of that time.
Yeah. Well, they've always talked about doing that, but it's just
Organic,
that creeps me out too.
Yeah.
But,
So recently, at least 2 weeks, that's 7 years ago. So let's talk about let's make it two of them, regardless of SaaS, SPSS, the problems. SaaS,
It's been a good idea.
that's not a cease and desist. Government, you have to talk to SaaS. We want to be independent. So that helps too.
That's
good.
good.
You guys have national.
is that?
They also have it.
Yeah.
And they're based in.
Oh.
We tell them
Into France.
That's dirty.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would know. I went to France. It kind of reminds me of just coming out.
agility. We're trying now is visualization.
Okay.
Yeah, they are just down
Right.
coding.
That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was down at Greater MSP.
Dan, is Ward still part of MinneAnalytics?
Well, I don't know, I'd say he might be, yeah. He chaired a social media track at Virtacore.
Right, okay.
And Sean's
The cards are going around. Let's go.
We don't get to.
You guys want to take a seat for a minute and let's I'll get it kicked off.
Nice to meet you. I saw it there yesterday too, and I'm like, I didn't realize that they were ordering this.
If I can get one of yours.
Sure. I gave you the one.
You give me the second.
There you
Oh,
go.
okay, well, so that's.
Now we're covered. Hey, I have an outdoor voice. Should we put the microphone the furthest from me?
Same here. The outdoor voice.
Why don't I have you guys sit for a second, otherwise I'm going to be standing right on top of you.
No problem.
All right, great. We'll get the meeting started. I'm Jan-Erik Acey. I'm one of the co-chairs for the Minnesota chapter. And to begin with, I'm just going to go through some housekeeping about our chapter and about IAOP. And we've got a couple of changes in the chapter leadership, so I just want to announce those. So just going forward, can we adjust that so that we can see the presentation a little bit better? So we're trying a new format since the topic of today's chapter meeting is SMAC, we figured that we ought to demonstrate that we're capable of new tools. So we're using Google Hangout. So that's something that we haven't used before, and hopefully it will add value. We'll certainly be looking for some feedback after. So if it doesn't, then just tell us and we'll drop it and we'll go back to WebEx and the way that we've done meetings before. So we always have a fair number of people that are virtual, so we want to make sure that we make this applicable for them as well. So as far as IAOP, you may know that IAOP has about 120,000 members worldwide. Of that membership, 85% of them say that their membership has helped them improve their outsourcing. 93% who are COPs, and many of us who are members of the chapter have gotten our Certified Outsourcing Professional designation, have said that it has helped them in their career. I know personally I can say that with the kind of work that I do now at ISG as a consultant, that definitely my clients look for some kind of certification or indication that I have experience in the governance area. So it certainly does help, and just I think the networking is the other key reason why most of us are involved in IAOP. So just quickly, IAOP offers networks, chapters, which is what we're part of today. They have an outsourcing summit, one that is annual, held either in Orlando or now in Scottsdale. And then they have regional ones. There's one coming up in Singapore and in Guatemala, I think. It's on a later slide. They've got, of course, the certifications, and then they've got Pulse, which is an online media that just advertises different topics such as the ones that we're covering today, and helps connect everybody worldwide really with what's going on and who is writing about specifically outsourcing. You're going to get copies of all this, so I'm not going to go through all the slides, but there are specials that are offered for those that are first time. It's talking about a couple of the upcoming meetings, both international as well as the US-based ones. I want to just spend 1 second on some of the, not designations, but the what do I want to call it, awards that IAOP is doing. One of them is the Global 100, and it looks at the top advisors, the top vendors, and it's a very rigorous certification process or application process. And then IAOP has a committee of people like all of us who rank these vendors each year. And from a sourcing perspective, it's very helpful because not only do you see who's top ranked, but you happen to sit on the advocacy and outreach committee, and we look and pick those people. So it's an opportunity for us to highlight organizations that are doing something special in outsourcing, where we believe that they have done something that the industry can learn from. And so IAOP takes those companies, they write white papers about them, they highlight them at the conference, and so not only are you just getting the award, but everyone from IAOP is benefiting. You're hearing about what is it that they did that made that relationship better. From the Outsourcing Hall of Fame, we're trying to recognize those people worldwide who made the difference. You know, how have they and their contribution changed the world of outsourcing, or how we think about it, or from an education standpoint, whatever it might be. And so there's an opportunity to nominate. If there are people that you work with, people that you've engaged with that you feel have really made a difference, then please let us know, and we will help you through the nomination process. And finally, the I'm not even going to say it. It is the Global Outsourcing Social Responsibility Award. They've got an acronym for it that I've never known how they pronounce it. But the company I work for, ISG and IAOP, partnered to create this award, and it's about social responsibility. And it's looking for companies that are demonstrating that they're doing something different, whether it's for the community, whether it's for the environment. There are a number of different things. And in fact, there's here on the next slide that talks about some of the publications that IAOP has recently come out with that you have access to. So as I said, Singapore is the Asian Pacific Conference, Guatemala is the one in November, and then the next World Summit is in February, again in Scottsdale. This is the guide that I was telling you about. So they've written, I mean, it's a guidebook, actually, and it has a lot of case studies in it about corporate social responsibility, and it is available for those, for members. And then there's master classes coming up. I'm not going to read through these things, and I think that's it. So we here at the Minnesota chapter have made a couple of changes in the leadership, so I want to just announce a couple of those, and I've got a write-up that I just wanted to read for you. So Cheryl Seeley is a new member of our chapter leadership, and she's a manager at Thomson Reuters. I've known Cheryl for many, many years, and she is very influential in the Twin Cities area, just because Thomson Reuters is a leader in how they've chosen to outsource. Cheryl has been very involved in that and has been willing to share both the good and the bad, the things that they've learned the hard way and the things that they've done right. And I think that's what this kind of event is all about, as well as she and I were part of, and she still is, the Twin Cities Global Sourcing Users Group. It's a group that I actually founded 15 years ago when I was at American Express and Target. Randy Kirihara from Target and I thought, you know, maybe it's a good idea to sit down and share with everybody else who's starting to do outsourcing what we've learned and help them so that they don't make the same mistakes we did. And before we knew it, we had 30, 40 companies that were involved in it. So it's a good organization. We can tell you more about it if you're interested. There is one stipulation: you have to be a client. Vendors or advisors, or even when I was an analyst at Forrester, are not allowed. So the idea is that there's a lot of open sharing in that group. But Cheryl has actually been involved for over 20 years. She is a COP. She actually sits on the Training and Certification Committee. So she's part of the committee that looks at what we're doing with the COPs and all of the different certifications at IAOP. She is a judge for the Global 100. So as I said, those companies that are applying to be named and ranked in that 100, it's a group of people like Cheryl that are professionals that, you know, deal with vendors and advisors all the time, and so they're able to apply their own criteria to making that judgment. And so we're very happy to have her as a new co-chair. At the same time, I want to announce that JP Balakrishnan from Infosys is no longer going to be a co-chair. He's had some changes at Infosys in his responsibilities, and so he is stepping down and will be part of our executive board. So he'll still be involved. I want to point out that JP was the influencer that helped IAOP decide that there should be a Twin Cities chapter. So we definitely thank him and Infosys for the involvement they had in getting the chapter up and running. Then finally, I want to, for those of you who don't know Jane Siegel, who was very, very involved at IAOP. She was part of the Advocacy and Outreach Committee, a number of other committees. She was a chairman for the Cloud chapter, passed away suddenly this last couple of weeks from a sudden illness. So she will be greatly missed. She was someone from Carnegie Mellon and brought the CMMI influence into IAOP. She was very influential in her really research and writing about outsourcing and the whole industry, and so she'll be greatly missed. With that, I'm going to turn the time over to Rajiv, who will announce and introduce the panel, which is what we're all here for, and we thank everyone for coming.
Thank you, Jan. So, as Jan mentioned, the main topic of today's meeting is our discussion around SMAC. So, SMAC, as most of you know, is an acronym for Social, Mobile, Analytics, and Cloud. Right? Interestingly, when we look at it, they all seem separate, but reality is most of us, especially the younger generation, is very, very involved with social media. It's become one of the big channels for us to actually get customer feedback. And to make social media usable, you need to have a lot of analytics that goes with that. And that's really what brings business value to us. At the same time, the primary means of interacting with this new medium is through our mobile devices. That pretty much is becoming the only means of interacting with the social media type of setup.
He's over there.
oh, so I stand behind over there. Thank you.
Yes, Rajiv, you're proving the point that we're not used to it, because you're talking to a virtual group and you're standing outside of their viewpoint. So
thank you, Jen. So, and the good thing is we can adjust to it, right? So,
yeah, hopefully.
And finally, all of this is not possible without the cloud, because you've got to bring this together, and thousands and millions of connections being brought together into common environments and being able to analyze all this data. So it is about that interconnectedness. In fact, to Jan's point over here, if you look at today's meeting, right, the fact that we're doing this on Google Hangouts makes this chapter meeting in Minnesota a global event. Right? Anybody from anywhere would be logging into this, and believe me, all kinds of recommendation engines and all kinds of algorithms are probably going to be run on this data, right? Which is then going to be used by different sets of people. Now, the interesting question, and I'll ask this of the panelists as we get into this discussion, is how much of this is really usable? I mean, how much of this is valuable to us, and how much of this is for a lack of a better word, waste of time, right? So the reality is, this is the world that we live in. Just by the simple chapter meeting becoming a global event, right? We are all, I mean, almost everything that we do is part of some larger whole that is being analyzed all the time. So with that, I want to introduce the panel today. First, we have Phil Wilson. He's the co-founder and president of HyperIQ, a mobile development company here in the Twin Cities. Now, the interesting thing, in addition to this, Phil also heads up the Mobile Twin Cities chapter, or not
user
chapter,
group.
the user group, user group, that tries to bring, and very interestingly, I was talking to him this before this meeting, it tries to bring developers, it tries to bring marketers, and a whole lot of interested parties together to create an ecosystem, and he's been pretty successful with actually doing this. Right? On a personal front, Phil actually was a customer. He was a broadcast manager earlier in his life, right? So he sees this world from both sides, and I know we'll let Phil talk about it as we get into this. But then I have Doug Pollei. Yes. Did I get that right?
That's right.
Okay, thank you. So he's the VP of Strategy and Partnership at Virtacore, focusing on cloud adoption in almost every shade of it. Right? He is from Portland, works in Virginia, right across, and since he's been visiting Minnesota, he actually discovered the boundary waters. Right? And I believe you love to canoe now.
Love it.
So we look forward to hearing about cloud and about his experience in the space from Doug. Then we have Dan Atkins, and Dan is the Senior Director, Patient Insights at Optum. He's focused on data science, but more importantly, and for this discussion, is his second job. And his second job is with MinneAnalytics. And I'll read this out from Dan's card. MinneAnalytics is a Minnesota nonprofit serving the regional data science community of more than 3,700 big data and analytics professionals across more than 600 organizations. That's quite a number. And he conducts conferences and various different events, and I'll let Dan talk about it. The way we're going to do this is each of our panelists are going to talk about their specific area for 5 minutes, give you an idea of what they've been doing. Then we get into the discussion and try to understand about the value of SMAC and how people have been deriving value from these technology innovations. So with that, I'll hand it over to Phil.
Great. I have put together a quick little presentation of a few slides, and we're going to do a little technical switch here to feed that. So you'll see that momentarily. But to give you a little bit better idea of who I am, as you said, I'm the co-founder and president of HyperIQ. We're a mobile development shop based here in the Twin Cities, and we actually work out of COCO, which is a co-working space here in Minneapolis in the old Grain Exchange building. It's a great environment to be in. We really enjoy the collaborative space, and mobile really allows us to work with a whole lot of different folks. Are we ready to go? You need me to do something? I should be. I was just there.
Just need to share your desktop.
Yep. Let me see. Hang on. Give me the ball. And are you seeing me? There you go. Wonderful. There we go. And as part of the mobile space, about 8 years ago, a colleague of mine, Justin Grammons, launched Mobile Twin Cities. And back then, mobile was a little bit smaller space. And we very much looked at a way to try to get all aspects of mobile together in one room. Developers, marketers, business folks, enthusiasts for the space. We didn't want to necessarily be a strictly one platform dedicated user group where we just talk about what's happening in Apple iOS or happening in Android. We want to kind of have a whole broad scope of that. We meet once a month on the second Monday of every month at COCO in Minneapolis, and we also spawned an annual conference, which is, well, our 6th annual conference coming up in 2015 called Mobile March. It happens in March, but it also sort of coincides with the March of Mobile as a technology. We'd love to have you come out for that. Just as a brief overview, we probably want to talk about what mobile is, and what mobile is to us. Am I not moving? Takes a little while, so there's a little delay. Most people think of mobile as first and foremost their phone, and then they also think of tablets as tablets have grown. But in our view, in my view, mobile has given way to the Internet of Things, the connected home, the connected car. These are all, in my view, mobile-centric. They allow us to control where we are and where we aren't at any given time, mostly by our mobile devices. I also tend to continue to include a laptop in here, because for me, mobile is not necessarily a platform. Mobile is a lifestyle, and a laptop is very much a mobile part of the mobile lifestyle. So I still contend that we still do a little bit of that. I wanted to share a couple of things about mobile. Obviously, you've probably heard mobile is very big. Everybody says it. Everybody reiterates it. Just to give you an idea of how big mobile is, 150% of the population in the industrialized world use mobile. And you say, how can 150% use it? They have multiple devices. And just to give you an idea, that's more than toothbrushes. So there are more people using mobile than there are people using toothbrushes. Another little statistic that I'd like to share with you is that 85% of Americans say mobile devices are a central part of everyday life. They mostly relate that to, am I going backwards here? Sorry guys, want to catch up? One moment. I've already been there.
It's big.
It's big. It's big.
You can leave that up. I use that as an opening slide for mine.
There you go. Anyway, and then 70. What's interesting is that 73% of smartphone owners surveyed also own a tablet. So you can see where that 150% goes in. Now, if you notice this slide, I still contend that the laptop is mobile. So let me tell you a little bit about what mobile services are in demand right now. They include application development, which is what we do at HyperIQ. It has to do with mobile web, and that ability to maximize the web via a mobile device. And then there is a mobile marketing and mobile strategy. So we see a huge growth in all of these areas, and a growth in these areas that requires more staff and more people. The type of jobs that we talk about in that space include user experience, user designers, graphic designers, developers for iOS, Android, and the odd Windows phone. They're trying, honest to God, they're trying. And then there's also, of course, project management, the quality assurance part, and of course, marketing strategies. So that kind of gives you a brief overview of mobile business and what we see in the mobile space. And with that, I will hand it off to, who would you like me to hand it off to, Reggie?
Mike.
To Dan?
Sorry, Dan.
Yeah, go for it, Dan.
Well, I don't have any prepared statements or slides,
Why is that?
but I can speak. I'm not Phil.
I'm just kidding.
Well done, though. But you could have left the big up. So, big's an interesting word, and that's why I keyed off it, because big data is now what you hear in the news. And I'm here speaking to one of my night jobs. I have a day job, which is data science at Optum, which is part of United Healthcare. And specifically in my case, we try to predict whether or not your mom might take her cholesterol or diabetes drugs. And if not, we try to design an intervention so that she will take her drugs more frequently, so she'll use less medical spend. So it's a fancy predictive model, and that's the day job. The night job is not dissimilar to what this group is. We started out at the Southdale Library about 12 years ago with about 18 people. And about 7 years ago, I said, let's make it tool agnostic. Let's talk analytics. Let's talk about lots of tools, not just the user tool we were using then. And let's also talk about the domain, the business part of the problem. And we did the first one of those events where we actually talked specifically, again, healthcare, about the life science of a healthcare claim. What happens to information before an analyst sees it. And so we did a whole day on that. We brought a guy in that works at a Target pharmacy tech and a guy that works with hospitals, and it really took off. And then we threw the word big data into our conference. Indulged, because we narrowed the focus of our last conference to just healthcare and life sciences. We've done retail, we've done social media, we're doing marketing in September. But we just narrowed the focus to try to limit demand, and we still had 1,100 people on the register wait list. So a lot of people wanted to come, a lot of people did come. It was a very good conference. Big data is part of that, but big data is a buzzword. Analytics is really where it's at. Big data is just part of that. And to define analytics, in my opinion, I will make a distinguishing between business intelligence and analytics. And the word I like, because BI is not really the right word, to me it's metrics. Metrics is what happened. That's the past. How many units did you sell last month, right? How many people use mobile? Those are metrics. Analytics is a deep dive into data and making sense of it and learning things that aren't And a lot of times it involves predictive analytics. And the most famous member of our group is a guy named Andrew Pollei. And a lot of people have heard of him because he wrote a pregnancy prediction model for Target. And New York Times got a hold of it. And some father allegedly, and that is true because it's not accurately reported in the New York Times, found out his daughter was pregnant because she was getting coupons for diapers and formula in the mail. And the story's not quite true. Predictive model's true. And you can do that really with almost anything. You can predict medication adherence. You can predict pregnancy. You can predict somebody's likelihood to make a donation. It's all sorts of that. So that's enough on me.
Okay. Well, good. You want to be the guy?
I can pass it over to you.
Oh,
it's
remote.
mobile.
Okay. Great. So my name is Douglas Pollei, and I'm the VP of Internet Strategy and Partnerships for a company called Virtacore, and we focus on cloud infrastructure. So a lot of this stuff that we're talking about is interconnected, where when you're delivering mobile apps, you're delivering them from the cloud, cloud infrastructure. When you're delivering big data, they come from the cloud. So I just wanted to show you, this is a general slide. By the way, these guys are part of some pretty interesting groups. You're probably thinking, what group am I a part of? So in Virginia, there's the Northern Virginia Technology Council, which our company helps chair the infrastructure group, and we're part of that. So there's more infrastructure and cloud services in Northern Virginia than anywhere in the United States as far as infrastructure, and I'll talk to you about that. But the three key buzzwords that you hear, buzzwords like big, in the cloud, the three buzzwords that we always talk about are software as a service, which you probably use every day. This is your Facebooks and your Google Mail and all of that. A platform is a infrastructure service that doesn't have a lot of flexibility. It's a general rule set, and you use it in ways to develop applications or services, and that's like Pivotal or VMware service. And then an infrastructure as a service is something like Rackspace. So think of this as raw data center environment where then you build a cloud that's your own and you control the rules, and our company is part of the latter. And so when most people think of cloud, they think of Google. When I think of cloud, I see this. So this is an example data center. This one is actually in Silicon Valley. It's part of an Equinix family. But this is an overview of a data center campus. So a data center alley, which is in Northern Virginia, has the equivalent of probably 80 Walmarts in one area. These are non-branded buildings that you don't know which door to enter. They're very private, all enclosed by security, 7 layers of security just to get into the front door. But yeah, this is where your Facebook, where your Salesforce, where your Google, it all comes from these kind of buildings. And this is the next photo is when you see inside the building, that's what your Google comes from, is something like this, or your application that your infrastructure is hosted on for your enterprise. So that's a typical private cloud environment. So I wanted to show you this slide. This one's great because all of this stuff is hyped, right? We talked about big data, we talked about mobile, and it all goes through these hype cycles. And Gartner has put a great slide out. And if you don't follow the Gartner hype cycle, it's a great one to check out. But you can see cloud computing on the big arrow there is now it's gone through the innovation trigger, it's past the peak of inflated expectations, and now we're at the trough of disillusionment. Meaning if you can make it past the trough of disillusionment, you're onto the slope of enlightenment, which means your service or your technology will probably live on, and it has scale. And it'll go on to a plateau of productivity where it probably has an end of life, and then something else starts, right? Dan mentioned big data. There are so many flavors of cloud that we could put all of them on this type of trough, but these are major technologies, and you mentioned things that are happening out there with the Internet of Things, and all of that is happening on these types of troughs and plateaus.
Dan, your job is safe. Predictive analytics is at the top of.
I knew that.
Get in.
So when we think of cloud and big enterprise, and enterprise moving to cloud environments, what kind of benefits do they derive from moving to the cloud? And here are just a few, like agility or time to market, innovation, alignment to cloud business needs. I know from our experience, when we move big companies, a lot of them think that their biggest thing will be cost savings, and a lot of them realize today that their cost may be the same, or sometimes it's more expensive even. So they get that, they get a little disillusioned, right? But what they do benefit from, and we had a big company that was based in the Caribbean that has a lot of mobile telecom, and once they moved to the cloud and they started shutting down data centers and they realized the cost savings, they then started to outsource other elements of their business. So all of the mobile towers are no longer managed by them, they're outsourced to another company. And they're realizing all these things that were triggered by cloud as far as improving the efficiencies of the company, improving the technology infrastructure. So cloud, in a way, is more like for us, it's like a Trojan horse to innovation inside a big enterprise. It just keeps rolling on from there. So the biggest thing we see in cloud is you have two types of scenarios. One is cloud comes into an organization and everyone is siloed and they don't want it, right? Because they can't control it. Because you go from a silo model to a gatekeeper model. And you have a chief digital officer now who is responsible to gatekeep every new application or services that goes into the cloud. And that gatekeeper model is very dangerous to a lot of people. It feels threatening, but yet that's how you keep cloud in check, and you stop what's called cloud sprawl. Because now if you deployed cloud within those silos, you don't know where they are going. You don't know how much it costs. You have to have a gatekeeper, and that's when we're seeing a lot of benefits within large organizations that create an organization that has outsourcing that's provided to the cloud, and then they gatekeep everything within that environment. I think that's about it. But this last slide is a bit technical, and I won't go into it, but basically in the three flavors of cloud, you can see what you manage versus what an application vendor or a service provider would manage. And we'll provide these slides later, but it's kind of a geeky slide, but it gives you an idea of what's involved. So my last slide here, this is how sometimes I think about cloud and adoption of cloud services. So instead of risking anything new, let's play it safe by continuing our slow decline into obsolescence. So we don't want companies to do that. We want them to continue to try new things and start small, and the cloud can expand with them.
That's print media, right?
What's that?
That was print media, right?
So this time around, let me adjust to the. So
where would you like to go?
I can.
Okay.
So what's really interesting about actually, Phil, to your point about mobile devices and toothbrush, I can totally agree with that. My little guy, after waking up, first comes to me for the cell phone instead of going and brushing his teeth, right? Right. So really, as we think about SMAC, and all of you did mention, with respect to the specific areas that you're looking at, what I really want to try to understand is the adoption of SMAC in the industry, right? With the clients who are actually adopting a combination of these technologies, and how are you seeing it truly materialize? Phil, if I can start with you.
So I'm sorry, repeat the question for I got sidetracked with getting me offline. So what was try to?
So the question was, how do we see enterprises, really adopting SMAC? I mean, and what are the practical benefits that they are?
Well, I think it really relates very much so to Doug's last slide. I think that what holds any corporation back or any enterprise back is the fear of the unknown. And much of what we're dealing with in the social mobile analytics cloud world is, I don't understand, it's all new to me. When in actuality, it's probably not as confusing as it's made out to be. I mean, we talk about cloud, and cloud is kind of a buzzword for, well, what we used to call servers. I mean, it's basically the server space. Instead of having them in one spot, now we have them in big buildings, and they're much, there's much more data. Mobile, the problems we see in enterprise adopting mobile and truly benefiting from mobile is really grounded in fear of loss of control. And that's probably the same thing in the social space. Doug and I have spent some time together in doing social media type things, and it's always this fear of lack of control. Social is you're giving a lot of control to the masses rather than the few. Mobile is the same way. Mobile presents its difficulties to enterprise depending on levels of security, levels of involvement, levels of shared data and shared control. So it's slow in the enterprise. We still haven't seen the potential, I think, across all of the different categories we're talking about. We still haven't, enterprise still hasn't realized it. But you can't turn a battleship in a bathtub. It's going to take a little while. You get into a point where you understand how one thing works, and all of a sudden, especially in the technology space, which all of this falls in, and all is hinged to, it moves very quick. But I don't think rushing into something is all that bad, because especially in this space, there's a lot of bright, shiny things that come that ooh, that's cool, which really don't amount to much. So I think it's just a matter of time. It's a matter of patience, and it's a matter of trust and earning that trust from social media to mobile to the cloud.
So follow on a point that you made about the sort of the fear of the unknown, or the idea of losing control. We increasingly see the adoption of BYOB, bring your own device, right? So it's almost becoming a movement at this point. So how does that play into this equation? Because now the loss of control has already happened.
BYOD is really the biggest concern with BYOD is obviously that control of data, that security of data. Do you want your company data on the same device that the kids could be playing with on the way to vacation? Do you want that same thing there? But I think the fact that companies are addressing it, IT professionals are addressing it, security departments are addressing how do we deal with BYOD, means they know it's here. They know it's here to stay, and we've got to figure out ways that we can make it effective for the company, because being able to really have access, your employee to have access to your company and what they need to do their job 24/7 usually means you're going to get more productivity out of them. You're not going to necessarily demand it, but they'll most likely be more productive because they can have it with them wherever they are. I don't know, what are you seeing, Dan, as far as the shared data piece? Because we always think about, okay, all of this data is in one spot and it's vulnerable.
Well, yeah, and then there's the PHI aspect of things that make people very paranoid, personal health information that they have to protect. I mean, we see the cloud, where we see it within my day job, is we see your cloud is in the typical sense, but a private cloud that, my organization is creating their own clouds that I can get at from anywhere, including right here, which I just did because I need to keep my day job, so I have to check in occasionally. But that's enabled a different lifestyle for me, because now not only do I work from home, I live in my office. Well, today, my office is right here because of the device, and so it works really good. But yeah, I mean, the cloud is the old servers, it's the old mainframe. It's it's always been here. It's just now it's the buzzword people are outsourcing to it, which you can really speak to more than anything.
So one follow-on with respect to the data part of it, right? how much of this is real? I mean, when you say SMAC and people are leveraging social data, right? And you deal with it from a healthcare and other perspectives as well. How real is it in terms of the value that people are deriving from this data, right?
Well, I think the great example is the news Facebook made, where and I don't know how many people are familiar with it, but a data scientist there deliberately controlled news feeds for a handful of people and was filtering out positive updates for one group and filtering out negative for another, and then they watched what it's called in the analytics world is it's sentiment analysis. Are you happy? Are you sad? Are you good with a product or bad with a product? And that becomes a very challenging, especially in Twitter with 140 characters. Facebook allows for more, but they do sentiment analysis around that. And what they actually just found is people that were tending to get more negative news feeds from their friends would then be more negative themselves, and vice versa, the positive people. Of course, the uproar was you were controlling us and didn't tell us. And of course, that's happening all the time. In this case, they turned it into a study. And so, it's quite interesting. The Google flu. We were speaking about that the other day. They did a predictive model around the flu, and it was wonderful because they were just watching people do searches on things, and they could tell what was happening. And then they published the results, and people started talking about the study, and it threw the model totally whack because suddenly people were Googling the model instead of actually saying my daughter's sick.
So Doug, coming to the cloud aspect of this, in adoption of SMAC, right? How do you see? I mean, cloud is obviously an integral part of it, right? But in terms of you mentioned that many of the customers sometimes tend to not see the cost savings per se, but they probably derive savings from other means, right? In the context of SMAC, what have you seen when people are adopting the cloud to support this paradigm? Right?
Well, so Amazon is the largest player in the entire cloud market, being the giant whale. And I don't know if you saw recently that the CIA just made an announcement they're going to move all of their data to Amazon, which is a big deal. Which means there's a lot of trust that's going on from the government side in order to use public companies like Amazon to be able to, to sort through all of their big data needs. And one of their services that they have that is very efficient at doing this is called Redshift. And Redshift is able to sort through at a very inexpensive price all this data. And so they can do it better than the government themselves. And so that's where you're seeing a lot of the transitions that are happening now is when we saw from Snowden a lot of mistrust in the cloud, right? And that really affected a lot of international business into the United States, especially from companies like Google or Amazon and others, and it caused a big uproar. You saw with the German chancellor saying that I'm going to build my own cloud so that all of mobile data is not going to leave my country, or Brazil, the same thing, because you're tapping into our data. So security is a big deal, and now that a lot of the Silicon Valley companies are banding together to say we are going to boot out any type of requests from the government, not allowing any type of access to our data centers. And the biggest thing is they are now all encrypting all of their transport data between the data centers so that data center data cannot be tapped. More security, more encryption, more pushback by the large players, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and others, IBM, by saying that they don't want to interact with government, yet still have them as customers. So I think that's an interesting stuff that's happening in the latest quarter here in the cloud environment.
So now this brings up a very, very interesting scenario, right? Especially when you combine mobile with all of this. I'm using my mobile traveling to different countries, and you have these security scenarios coming up where you have governments actually putting in restrictions that data cannot move. Right? How do you see the cloud and cloud providers reacting to that?
That's a tough one. So the fact that data can't move and it has to be resilient within a specific country, this will cause some issues, I think, especially as, say, Germany now wants to create their own mail platform. So they don't want to use things like Google Mail anymore. They want to develop their own country-based mail system, so that all that data resides within their own private network, their own private cloud, essentially, like we talked about. You're going to see, I think, a bit more uprising, but I also see that countries that can afford to do that or don't have those luxuries, they'll be coming up to scale and not, I guess, be as tepid or worried about the amount of data that's traversing across different networks in different countries. But in order to operate in international business environments, they're going to have to let loose of some sort of restrictions, right? So it's going to be a big give and take. It's going to be a battle and shifting back and forth. I think over the next year, everyone here should watch, especially Brazil and Germany, and how they evolve with their countries and the cloud environments.
So Dan, really this goes back to the, in big data, one of the propositions that you're talking about is we put all this data together and we try to get some insights out of it, right? In this scenario, are we reacting from a big data perspective to try to address these possibilities that data could be in silos in countries? Is that even a consideration that is coming up?
Well, yeah, I mean, if I understand the question, I mean, the countries and the data, the analytics really has to do with the fact that the data, the magnitude of the data, both the breadth of it is growing and the depth of it's growing. And, the what I call the tells, things in the data that indicate you may be pregnant or you may not take your medication, they might be just a handful. And the real issue is figuring what those are. And it's kind of surprising. There was another story actually related to pregnancy. A woman got pregnant, and so what she did is she told a handful of people and told them not to go post on social media. It was a private event, and she didn't want it to go. And so their behavior actually changed because of social media and their physical circumstance. What happened is they started paying cash for a stroller and things like that, and they tripped a bank fraud warning because suddenly they looked like they were doing money laundering, because suddenly they stopped using credit cards because they're trying to hide the fact that she was pregnant. And so what you see is people's behavior changes in response to the fact that they think they're being monitored, there's data in the cloud, they don't want to know, and that tracks a whole different set of things. So it's really quite a fascinating, very dynamic world.
So
does that lead to that study that recently on NPR where the woman tried to come off social media and then she tried not to be tracked and still couldn't get out of all the clouds?
No, I mean, it's impossible.
You can't get off the grid.
So that is
go to the boundary water.
It's true.
That is going to be my next question from a mobile perspective, right? Are we so connected that everything that we do is known now, or is there getting off the grid?
It's easy to say that the whole concept of privacy is dead, and because we are connected all the time. See it as a 24/7 experience for all of us. The issue is always there are many ways in which you can limit the amount of access to your data wherever you are and whatever you're doing. It's that we as users have sort of readjusted our tolerance, our expectations. What's private to me is not at all private to my kids, because of their growing up with social media. They're growing up with this always on, always connected piece. They share things that we never shared because we just thought they were private, and it's a different world now. But it is something that it's another thing that people have to be aware of, just like, you don't want to, the old adage, if you don't want to share your salary with anybody, well, you don't want to share your bank PIN. You don't want to share your password. It's all a matter of, okay, I've got to remember that it's possible that I could be being watched at any given time. But when I say watched, I don't necessarily mean from a visual standpoint, but every keystroke could be recorded. There's that access, that thing that is possible, and you really have to. I've always said that security starts here. You've got to use common sense, and you've got to understand that everything is at risk now because of the connectivity of our society.
But people are willing to trade some of that because they see a benefit.
Yep.
And Robert Stevens at our keynote at Medtronic a couple of years ago said it well. The division between the spooky and the creepy. And he's willing to take spooky because, and he says everybody should design around what the hospitality management companies are doing. Target and Best Buy should follow them because because he wants New York Times in the morning, he doesn't want a USA Today. And when he gets the New York Times, he thinks, well, that's a little spooky how they know that. But he's okay with that. Creepy is when it gets to be the part that, really totally weirds you out, like your daughter's pregnant or, things of that nature. So what are you willing to give up in exchange? For the example with you with the mobile, right? Mm-hmm. You walk into a store, you look at a product in an end cap for 90 seconds, you walk away, your phone gets a text message said, you didn't pick that up, if I give you a 15% discount, could I interest you today? I mean, that technology exists today. And are you willing to take a 15% discount? Do you want that, or you want to exchange your location in exchange for that? That's the question.
And what we're talking about, that can be done in many different ways, whether it's, an RFID, which is a low frequency, very mild sort of transmitter, or the new beacon technology. Apple is calling beacons iBeacons, which is really basically Bluetooth low energy. The one thing to remember about all of those things, and again, I always kind of come back to this, is it is an opt-in space. It is very much an opt-in space. And the fact that this technology has grown sends the signal, just as Dan was saying, that we're willing to give up some of that privacy in order to be delighted by what technology can give us. And to some people, a 15% off offer of something that you looked at, you just picked up and looked at, well, that's kind of cool. Because if a clerk came up and did that to you, you would say, oh, that's nice. What a personal touch. So I agree. It's a matter of how much will you give up.
So I want to ask this question, and I'll ask this to you, Doug. Is there something called too much SMAC? I mean, think about it. I mean, today in our interactions, almost every day, you look at you pick up the phone to call somebody. It says, "Can you take a survey at the end of this?" Right? Or any interaction at the end of it, somebody wants to get something from you. Is there? So I'm tired of it sometimes. So the question is there something called something that is that we can define as too much SMAC, right?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, like Bill was talking about, we give up a lot of data, right? When we utilize Google and searches, I mean, Google provides these for free for a reason, right? Because it's collecting all the data on us as what we're searching and what we're doing, and the mobile phone can even track certain areas that we're at and provide us like the delights as well as, again, to going into big data, that now all can be correlated to some type of profile, right? And those profiles can be sold as well as to other companies so that they can target you utilizing these kind of technologies. So is that too much for some people? And then if you try to pay cash and come off the grid, all of a sudden you're seen as abnormal, right? And why aren't they interacting this way? So yes, I think that some of the tests that have been done recently, like we mentioned, where people have tried to specifically come off of Google services. You see in Europe recently that was happening where the right to be erased is now being implemented by the European Union, and in France, I think, is one of the first countries. So what will happen when that right comes to the United States, the right to be erased, and hitting many of these cloud providers and big data providers, even mobile providers, right? Because there's a lot of interaction between all three areas, as you say, too much SMAC, right? I think there'll be some temperance as we move forward in this new world.
I think it's also a generational question. You know, what's your overload on too much information? Because, yeah, if you sit down, anybody knows if you sit down to, you know, one of our clients is BuzzFeed, and now all of our developers get all their information from BuzzFeed, and it's too much information. But, you know, a generation has a higher, you know, our younger generation has a much higher tolerance. You know, taking the phone out of my daughter's hands, who's 15, you basically physically have to take it out of her hands to get her to go to sleep. Otherwise, she will stay and get into this circle of what's on Instagram or Pinterest and Twitter and Facebook, and you know, it's an incredible thing to see. To those of us that grew up prior to that, you know, prior to the mobile phone, prior to the internet, I think our tolerance is much lower because we kind of yearn for that simplicity, that bliss of not knowing what's going on every minute. So I think it's a generational question.
Except the digital natives versus nomads.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yes, exactly.
So I'll ask one last question and then we turn it over to the audience, right? I mean, from a technology perspective now, almost everybody, every single provider is actually reacting to this. What are you seeing happen in the market, particularly the larger players, right? The Amazons and the IBMs and Googles. You know, how are they reacting to this SMAC sort of paradigm? Right?
Everybody's doing it now, is what it. Whether they're doing it or not, everybody says they're doing it. That's what I see. I mean, it's everybody's got a big data play. Everybody's got an analytics, a predictive engine.
Did I mention our cloud services that we're doing?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of mind-boggling, really. I mean, that's what you see from the provider standpoint.
I agree. Like mostly every large enterprise that's probably represented here today has some sort of cloud strategy, has a mobile strategy, and is now getting into an analytics strategy and a big data strategy. And your conference kind of showed that, right? Once you added the words big data into it, it was a gobble, right? Everyone just swarmed in order to be part, because didn't you say, I think you said earlier that Target was the biggest attendee from a corporate perspective?
Yeah, we had a life science healthcare conference, and Target was the third biggest attendee, and they don't operate in that space. They don't care. It's to them, it's analytics. They've embraced it corporately. I mean, in 2009, we had a conference at Target, and we tried to get speakers in the retail space. And Target was all there. This is before the New York Times article. I had to literally drag somebody from SuperValue, and we got one guy from Best Buy. I could have told you then who's going to survive. It's people that are embracing analytics and looking to the future are going to survive, and you'll see that in the analytics space.
To kind of your point, this is the new world, right? It's the world we exist in, and I think going to that one slide, you have to adapt, right? But yet it does cause contention in some ways. So it's the new kind of paradigm shift.
But Target now has to take a picture of a product, right?
Yep. You know, to me, I constantly stop and I try to get everybody else that you know, whether it be a client or a colleague or an employee, or you know, just to stop every once in a while and think about what this is all about, what is actually happening. So many times I'll be talking with sharing somebody with some sort of function of an application or some sort of something on the web, and I say, you know, they go, well, that's not a big deal. You know, you stop and think about it. You got to realize that there are people putting together numbers and characters and certain strings that make stuff appear. You know, you open up a website. That is a string of code making things happen. That's some pretty magic stuff. You think about the fact that we no longer have to have rooms and rooms and rooms of paper. We can still have it on a small chip. It's still, to me, it's such an exciting time to be alive that you know, I hate to see that, you know, the younger generation will grow up a little bit more jaded because of it. It's a little less
exciting because, you know, you hear it, I especially hear it whenever there's a new, an Apple quarterly call or an annual conference from Apple. You know, the press will walk away and they didn't really do anything big. You know, when's the next iPhone? I mean, oh my God, there's some really great stuff out there. And I think I would rather see smaller incremental changes because it involves more people. And I hope that happens, that we all don't just wait for the next big thing. What this technology does, what SMAC allows us all to do is live that axiom of try something new, fail fast, and move on to something else.
Fail fast. If I could add one thing just to feed off of what you said, and I opt in, absolutely. Yeah. And the other thing is the Internet of Things.
A lot of people used to agree. He opts in.
The Internet of Things is really the future. And I can control the thermostat at my house from my phone, and I do that. And it's great. And I also know when my kids get home and all sorts of things, which weird them out a little bit, but it keeps them from having a party. But there was a guy from TechCrunch that was looking at people's social media feeds, and we tried to bring him in for a speaker. He wanted $8,000, so he didn't. But what he was looking at he looked at people's Fitbits. They're willingly sharing their Fitbit information. This gets to the Internet of Things and the connected self, or the quantified self as it's known nationally. And he was able to determine spousal infidelity based on the data patterns in the Fitbits in relation to two adult individuals. And he's literally, you see, they're having an affair because I can tell by the pulse and the activity and the movement, etc. I mean, it's like, and that's all opt-in.
Opt-in.
Right?
Yeah, there's also new paradigms out there as far as, you said, comfort levels and ability, right? So taking mobile and then big data, you're seeing now things like Uber, right? Uber, where people have their mobile phone and now they can book a taxi quite instantly, or Airbnb. And this is where we used to be scared of strangers. Now there's no stranger danger anymore. All of a sudden, like, we're inviting them to our homes and we're sharing our homes and we're billing out for it. So my brother-in-law, who lives in Manhattan next to Wall Street, he leaves the entire summer and makes money on his apartment in New York City. And more people are doing this. And it's a disruptive thing that's happening, utilizing the big data, utilizing the mobile services. And we can go on and on about other services where people are sharing. I think now Airbnb is now going to get into sharing your home for meals. So you would actually go to someone's house for, say, a Thai meal or an Indian meal or a Western, Southwestern meal or something, and people can sign up and go to your house and eat. And that will be some of the next things that people will be sharing together. It's a really different world, right? But when you think about what they're trying to say, some of the people, these companies are, hey, 100 years ago, you were on the Western frontier and like, hey, do you need to sleep in my barn? There was not a lot of stranger danger. It was very open. They're saying that we're all coming back to our roots. I don't know. That seems to be some of the language out there, but I don't know if I agree with all of it. But it's a pretty interesting world that we're going to be approaching.
So on that note of returning back to our roots, let's open it up to the audience. Any questions that we have from the audience for the panel over here?
Yeah, Phil, can you talk a little bit more about BYOD? For many people, they were excited about being able to bring their iPhone or their device rather than getting the cheap one that their company was willing to buy for them. Right. So that was a good thing. But then they had to sign these mobile iron, the company can in and basically erase everything. I can't guarantee you that they'll save anything that you own. They're just going to make sure that they obliterate anything that could be company sensitive. And people are saying, I don't know that I want to opt into that. I don't want to give my company that ability, yet they want me to be 24/7 always on, and I don't want to walk around with 2 and 3 devices.
Yeah, and that's happening still. There are still lots of people, I could say a good 50% of the people that I interact with on a daily basis are carrying 2 phones because they have their personal phone and their business phone, and that drives me a little crazy because I don't really want to be burdened with that myself. But it's one of those things that is going to take some learning, and it's going to take technology to answer it. You know, there is a, you know, this evolving space of MDM, which is mobile device management. This ability to centrally manage phones or devices or you know, tablets from one location. One IT professional in your building can tell, you know, who's got what device, what's on that device, what's company and what's private. And I think that technology will ultimately come to an answer on that. It takes a while because of the innovation space has, you know, spawns the walled gardens, and it also the open source. So if you look at Apple and iOS, it's what's considered a walled garden. Nothing gets on an iOS device without Apple allowing it. But the Android world is open source, and anything can go on that because it's up to the crowd to decide, you know, what makes it and what doesn't make it onto a Google device. So it's very complex, but I think ultimately BYOD is here to stay. It's just a matter of how do we, you know, what do we create that allows us to control that data? How do we partition our phones that make it like we are, part business, part non-business? So, I wish I had a great answer, because it's, again, this is what's really exciting about this space. And again, I know I get a little bit giddy, but it's just, it is some magic stuff. So we have to figure out what it is that we can limit and what we can't limit.
I think Google just acquired a company that allowed you to have two operating systems on the same phone, so you could have, you know, fun in the front and business in the back. You know?
It's the mullet of mobile. Party up front, or business up front, party in the back. Yeah.
Okay, question for Douglas.
Yes.
Bill McDonald Carlson. So my biggest concern is when I'm buying software as a service and they've got a huge data center that they're sharing platforms, and all of a sudden maintenance has to be done. It doesn't necessarily mesh with my business model. I might have business going on in the United States, in the UK, and Asia Pacific. And depending where the data center is and when they do their maintenance and what day of the week, it could disrupt our different parts of our business. Some businesses close out at 2 o'clock in the morning. Other parts of the business, they're busy in the afternoon, and other businesses, you know, they're busy, you know, all day long. So when I see that they're going to be doing maintenance on certain days at certain hours, and I start calculating time zones, it's just really frustrating.
So you're seeing, so the question is, you're in a multi-tenant environment in some sort of data center that's doing maintenance and upgrades, and you're seeing downtime when those maintenance.
Software as a service companies, you know, they're telling you there's going to be maintenance.
Okay, so in these kind of environments, you're saying, how do you choose the right software solution company that won't have these kind of outages? Because I know Salesforce will have downtime at specific times to upgrade their platforms, and like you say, you could be having business in another country that needs to be up during that time and makes it ineffective. I guess it all depends on the type of company and when they do their maintenance. And now we're seeing with Google, and as well as others that have more advanced platforms, they're allowing much more to happen in the background to not affect the maintenance windows. So you're seeing maintenance windows shrink the more advanced the platforms in the background, the infrastructure becomes. So I've seen that with Google's platform that recently got upgraded. They're using a lot more sophisticated algorithms to be able to talk to the software. So I would say hold on, you're in early days, right? As platform as a service or software as a service goes. We're only into this, what, 5 years, 6 years now? I mean, think about that as far as an infant is concerned. You know, we're not even into teenage years yet. We're very infant, but yet everything is being dumped here. So I would say make your bets on the companies that are making a lot of the advancements. and then follow and provide them feedback as well. I mean, they need to hear it. And then stick with the ones that are trending upwards as far as their stock price and growth. And you may want to go away from those that are losing customers or stagnant, because they will have to stick to those old methods and not be able to invest in these new methods we're talking about.
I've also found that anything can be had for a price. So if you look for services that offer redundancy across different time zones, so one may be down for maintenance and the other one is up, you know, you can pay for all that sort of stuff, but it's not necessarily cost effective. But again, I think it's early days.
Just real quick, to your point, a lot of the startups that are using and developing on Amazon's platform, the largest, you know, whale in this particular area, many of them, like you say, will only go to one Amazon zone. So you have your East Coast zone or your West Coast zone or your Midwest zone. Many of them do not opt into having multiple zones. So when they have downtime in one, that the other zone can pick up in a high redundancy kind of environment. And so if they're on the cheap, they won't invest in the high availability that, say, some of these infrastructure providers can provide. So that, and as they grow, they can then opt into that, but in the early days, they don't. And that's why you're seeing crashes of major systems that go down when Amazon goes down, for example.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, who's got everything they've got on their home computer backed up?
Photos.
Off-site?
Mm-hmm. So just a point to add over there to what the panel has already mentioned, right? A lot of it also has to do with the maturity of the SaaS model. So SaaS 1.0, which was typically about a platform for you, right? Those had some of the problems that we're talking about. Now, the newer type of solutions that are coming up are trying to take care of virtualized and that whole cloud capabilities that should make that window sort of in many cases disappear actually. But then again, it depends on your specific SaaS solution that you're looking at.
Are there any ISO standards or other types of standards that they're starting to come up to that you could say, I want you to be at this standard?
I'm sure there's some committee or organization somewhere with standards. It's just a matter of getting those standards adopted across, you know, a wide range. That's the challenge too.
Yeah, there is no particular standard to say some company must have multiple zones for their software as a service. Or
I bet you there is somewhere.
There, but I mean, I'm sure there's applicable standards they should adopt, but whether they do, it's a different story.
Question about, I guess, big data analytics and predictive analytics. It's always seemed to me that the value of the analytics is only as good as the person who's posing the hypothesis. And you can have all the data in the world. That may be more of a problem than a benefit because you don't know what the right questions to ask. And you know, how do you know what you're looking for when you just have this big pile?
Yeah, it's like the quality of what comes out of the mine is basically what's falls on the miner. You know, so who's the miner that's digging for that data? Yeah, it's a tough. You know, that's why I think that, and I can't speak necessarily for Dan, but I think that was probably that tipping point for them, saying MinneAnalytics versus big data. We're all enamored by the big thing. You know, there's a big thing, but really what it is has nothing to do with the sheer amount of data that's out there. It's finding what's important in that data. For example, we look at the Internet of Things space right now and the connected device, which really kind of centers on the smartwatch now. And how smart is a smartwatch? You know, a Nike Fuel Band is really kind of a glorified pedometer. But the next level of smartwatch will have a sensor that can keep track of your blood sugar, or a sensor that can keep track of your heart rate. All of a sudden, that data, that's real data. That's something that I can act on. That's something that I can see, hey, that's affecting my health. Whereas I did 3,999 steps and 4,001,
this week. It's a different space.
And interesting, United Health Group here locally is now investing into a group that will then create these kind of devices that collects that data, because it affects people's insurance, right? I think, I don't know if you work for UHG or anybody here, but then they want to elaborate on that. But I think that's an interesting play where now we're going to see some of the local guys here as the enterprises get into the device manufacturing environment to collect the data.
Right. And I think that there's a lot of, maybe, I don't know, I never took stats when I was in college, but any kind of research model, any kind of statistics, statistics basics will help you in determining what the questions are. Because just like any survey that you ask of somebody, you've got to ask the right question. And that's the key. I think that's the key to big data. That's the key to the analytics space is, am I asking the right question? That if I get the answer, I can actually act on that answer.
So one of the problems in that space as well is that the kind of solutions that we have in this space don't or are beginning to mature to where you can ask these questions, right? Basically, you need solutions that allow you to discover, and not solutions that ask you for what is your requirement, and then you produce some results, because nobody can give you I want a particular correlation. Nobody can give you requirements for a correlation, right? So you need discoverable solutions, and those are beginning to show up. There are some very interesting things out of Stanford and John Hopkins and other things that are coming out that are sort of beginning to address this space. But even now, it is very much people dependent. You're depending on really good data scientists to ask the right questions.
So when we started outsourcing 15, 20 years ago and on, it was all about throwing lots of people who were a whole lot cheaper than the people we had here at problems that were very, very concrete. You knew what the process was. It was just a fact of moving. Now you're in a space that's totally different from that, and yet we're still talking about outsourcing all of this stuff. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what this is doing to the concept of outsourcing and how so much intelligence can go in. You're moving intelligence out of organizations now, not just people. And it's in a sense, it's changing balances of power.
I think, Jan Eric, you'd be good to answer that one.
Yeah, I can.
We got a seat right here.
Yeah.
And Phil and I actually talked about this because part of the problem is that companies are still believing, if it's not invented here, it's not good. And those companies that are recognizing that the things that are core to make them who they are, and that's what they concentrate on, are the ones that are doing really well. Those companies that still believe that everything that they do has to be done internally, has to be done with their own people, they're the ones that are confused by why they're falling behind. And I know with my company, with ISG, a lot of what we're doing is helping companies recognize that you want to outsource those things that you can't be good at, that you can't have enough skilled people, you can't have enough information to be able to make the right decisions. You need to go and find a company that actually has invested in that research, in those skill sets. And so to your point, outsourcing is not about who's the cheapest anymore. Outsourcing is about who has the knowledge. And when we talk about it from a mobile standpoint, it is so complicated to figure out what is your strategy going to be and how you leverage mobile to get to your end clients. And so should you get the people that are in your company today to try and figure that out, or should you just go and find the company that actually has invested millions of dollars in research and whatever else to come in and advise you? But that's where I think that it starts to get complicated, is are you willing to take that third-party advice? Are you willing to let other people come into your company and drive your strategy and actually be not just consultants that come in for a week, but permanent people within your company? So you permanently outsource your mobile strategy to a third party, and they're the ones that are going to drive it from this point forward.
That's a whole different idea of outsourcing. You know, here in that case, you're looking for a very small number of specialists,
right,
as opposed to a large number of generalists, and the cost balance is different. So very, very different. And, you know, you talked about bringing in a consultant versus you know, hiring someone to stay with you for a long period of time. But what you're really talking about there is specialization and expertise.
Well, and I think that Rajiv can talk about it just from what Infosys has gone through from the time that they were 1,200 people when American Express, when I was there, first hired Infosys, to the 160,000 people that they are today, or whatever the number is, and the makeup of those people. Back then, they were all mainframe programmers because that's what you couldn't get, and so they specialized in that. But now they're everything that you can imagine.
So just to address it from the Infosys perspective, as well as touch on the data side of things, right? So if you look at it from an Infosys perspective, the nature of outsourcing is changing. It started with this the skills part of it. Then it was about cost, right? Then it was then now we are in a situation where the model that we are being pushed towards is one of partnership. The conversations that we have, people no longer talk to you about outsourcing at cost and generalists. They are talking to us about what is the difference you can make to my business. Not depending on who you're interacting with. If it's IT, it's IT. But the question is, don't ask me for what I need you to do. You tell me what I need to do. So we are having to transform ourselves, and we are going through that journey. So the nature of outsourcing, as we have seen it, at least from an IT perspective, is changing significantly. And when we are doing that, you get into much more of a partnership model, and where we are having the discussions on, you know, can we do this entire thing differently? Can we take $1 billion out of your cost? So these are the kind of discussions that are happening. It's no longer about a particular area, and, you know, so how can we actually work together, right?
And I'm sorry. Keep going.
Don't worry. This conversation's good. Don't worry.
But, you know, the model used to be lots of people, you know, I'm going outside and save cost, but I can't hire enough people to do this. Now, in an analytics environment, it's not, I need lots of people. I need 2 or 3 people who are really, really good, who can ask those questions. And what does that do for your business model when you're up at 160,000 people and you're based on volume, not necessarily quantity?
So let's answer this specifically in the context of analytics, right? You need to break down that analytics process to understand which of these parts you can outsource and which you cannot outsource. So in the context of analytics, somebody who understands the business context, right? I mean, that's somebody who comes internally from the organization. You can have people who model the business, you know, who are actually creating the models. Those primarily have to come from the business, and you can augment them with experts based on the skill needs. So you take a skills-based approach over there. I need somebody who does time series modeling or some sophisticated type of solution. I augment the team to do that. Now, once a model is built, you have stages called model validation and other things which are more of repetitive, lot of it's not, when you look at analytics as a block, it's not really not a block. You actually can break it down into different areas. For example, when you talk about discovery, somebody who does not have the business context or does not understand what the business is going through cannot go to this pool of data and say, okay, let me start start discovering for you. It's not going to happen, right? So the discovery part, you can augment, bring expertise. Model building part, you can augment and bring expertise. Model validation and deployment of the models, those are areas that others can actually help you with. So you have to break it up and actually look at the pieces of this.
Does it get into the size, the volume that you're used to dealing with as Infosys? Can you get into those 1,000 body projects, or is your business model completely blown up at this point as you go further?
No, it's just a different part. See, really, what is happening is, what we intended BI to be, business intelligence to be, is this. You wanted to understand how your business was doing, and you wanted to try to figure out how to capture new business and new markets, right? The reality is what we built was telling me what happened, right? And that's based on the limitations and technologies that we had at that point. It's not that we didn't have. I mean, if you look at every financial services company, you had people modeling and predicting the markets throughout. I mean, you had these PhDs from MIT who would go and actually build these models. So those people were there. Now, with the tools available, others are able to get into that space. Right now the big data tools that are available have changed the cost equations, that others are able to get into that space. Even there, now then you're starting to define the space and say which of the pieces we can actually commoditize and which of the pieces really require that business expertise, and look at what can be outsourced and what really should not be outsourced. Right?
Every company looks at it differently at that point.
Every company does. Some of them, I'll give you an example, right? There are some companies that are whose business is analytics, right? We're dealing with a company in Europe. It's in the loyalty business, the cards and other things. Their business is analytics. So for them, they have a core sort of needs, and rest of it, they want somebody else to come and manage the platform and actually bring in large teams so that they can scale out their ability to analyze. They will decide what needs to be analyzed, but then they want an army of people who can go behind them and actually analyze that. There are others, the companies over here, Target and other companies, who, for them, analytics is at the core of their business, right? I mean, in terms of actually defining new business models that affects their supply chain, things that affect the customer interactions, and so these are models of how Target is different from other companies. These are not things that you don't need an army of people to tell you that. You need experts who know how the business is functioning to tell you that, right? For them, you will need these small sets of people who, and augmenting them with additional expertise, right, who can build those models. Now, validation of the models, running multiple tests across different data sets, these are things that you need an army of people to just run, right? And that part can be outsourced. So that's what you're seeing. You're seeing this tendency. The first sort of step in this was people saying that I can get data scientists and solve the world problems. Not going to happen. Okay. You take a data scientist, look at the amount, the breakdown of the work they do. 50% of a data scientist's time is spent on trying to get to the data. 30% of the time after that is spent on trying to redo the work that other data scientists have done. Right? So really, 20% of the effort is going to do the actual analysis. Right? We need to figure out how to make these things more efficient. So there's a technology solution that will actually make it efficient, while getting these data scientists to understand more of the business and build the models that will actually change the way you do business.
Since this is an open discussion, I'm probably just throwing my sense. As the client models and the client's point of view changed over a period of years, which got you in line, even the supplier, the service provider's model also changed. From the cost to process to value, it's more at innovation. In the example, I think the target that Virtacore mentioned is one size doesn't fit all. Similarly, one sourcing strategy doesn't fit all of your requirements. Application development, you'll look at it differently. Data center, you'll look at it differently. The SMAC per se, and I'll when I was at Target, a new Target's example, was perceived more as a co-sourcing strategy. And which is where, the functional input as to how the product should be, how the idea should be, how the consumer behavior, that comes in more from the client side. And the army that Roger is alluding to, that's the technological input that kind of comes in from your partner. And that's where it's more a partnership game in this particular field, which is like a SMAC world, which is more complex sourcing strategies than something, let's say application maintenance, which you just can simply pick it up and, outsource pretty easily. So this is a pretty high touch, high involvement, and high engagement as the way, most clients are pursuing. Does that suggest, well, obviously a need for greater collaboration? Does that then say that there's issues in going to India for this rather than going to Latin America, for example? Is it, work time zones and proximity, does that become more and more important?
Well, I would probably, borrow a statement that Phil had used in his talk a little there. That today's customer, if you look at today's customer's mind is more open-minded than what it was 5 years before. And others can correct me, Cheryl and Jan and Rick are here. But today, I think companies are more open-minded, and I'll share Target's example with you. Target is pretty traditional, orthodox. We don't want to be the first kind of a client profile. So when we wanted to get in the Target app that you probably use on yourself today, when Target wanted to get in the mobile world and the SMAC world, when we went to California, so all the leaders, the Target leaders were all decked up in suit, tie, 3-layered suits and stuff with the mineral water bottle sitting in front of them. And they call this army of people who are supposedly the mobile developers, and they walk in their sneakers and Bermudas and T-shirt, which doesn't even have a collar. And everybody's zapped. But that's the world. So a Minneapolis-based company which doesn't have any other offices, I'm talking about like a development office, anywhere in any part of the US, had to finally open 100 people capacity office in California, because you have to be open-minded. So we have to go, we have to take the horse where the well was, because that's the need of the hour. And of course, there's a partnership with another service provider, similar to Infosys. But that's how, that's the change that has brought, this SMAC has brought to the world. It has opened people's eyes, it has brought on wider dimensions. There is just so much of uncertainty, there is so much unknown there that you just cannot explore at your own. You have to partner with several other players, and quite a many of these names are way too small that 5 years before you wouldn't have wanted to engage. So it's a reality, and I think the real touch was needed for from even big clients perspective.
And I think from an outsourcing perspective, what's changing, as you pointed out on the collaboration, is we're moving away from the traditional vendor governance. How do I manage my relationship with you and make sure that I'm getting my money's worth, to how do I manage the collaboration or the system integration, service integration of all of these players that I have elected to bring in and be part of my infrastructure and my ecosystem of what it is I'm trying to do. And I think a lot of companies are struggling to figure out what's the role I'm going to play, or I need to play in making all of my players play together. I can't have these mono relationships. I need to have multi-tiered relationships where I bring them all together. And I say, okay, all of you are in this game with me. We've decided to do X, Y, Z. We need all of you to be part of it, and you're now all one team. And that's how we're going to treat you. Companies aren't used to that. They're not ready to embrace that. They don't have the skill set. They don't have the people who know how to be those collaborators and bring everyone together. So that's really the wave. You saw that in the last IAOP conference earlier this year. We're seeing a lot of talk about what they're calling SIAM, which is service integration management, rather than just vendor management.
It's interesting because in the time that I've been in the space, that is there anybody from Best Buy here? Any chance? Best Buy has moved from that platform of collaboration back to vendor management. And I think from a short-term concept, that regimen works very well for a short-term solution to business ails, but ultimately leads to just nastiness at the long end, at the long tail. It's just awful. So I think there's still companies that are trying to figure out how do we weigh those two things. And as I listen to this discussion, it really is a semantic thing, because when you hear outsource, you hear offshore. And when in actuality, outsource can be a very good thing. It's had a bad rap, I think, in the past, and now I think that because we're moving into these very specialized silos, it tends to make fairly good sense to outsource things.
It sounds like we're coming back to the consulting environment.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and I think you're right. I think, it's another name, it's like cloud, another name for server.
Yeah,
outsource, another name for consulting.
In the early days was taking over from consulting, and you didn't know, Anderson Consulting at that point in Accenture.
Yeah.
Are they a consultant or are they an outsourcer?
Right.
Now are they an outsourcer or
a consultant?
There's quite a few of these companies, they're Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 100, Fortune 200. They would have, about 200 to 600, anywhere between 200 to 600 vendors or suppliers in their IT basket. And so, again, coming back to the earlier point that I made, you don't use one stroke for all folks. You have to have different strategy there too. And, to Jan-Erik's point, things have moved away from traditional suppliers to emerging suppliers. Your managed suppliers, which you use the vendor governance model, but today is an era of what Rajiv mentioned, is more of the strategic partnership and collaborative management, where it's kind of a dual management. I as a client would not tell the vendor what to do, but they would they would tell me what I need to do and what my competition is doing. Else I'll be left behind. I think there was a slide on obsolescence, and that's just so true to today's world.
It's the same thing with the outsourcing providers. The struggle is on that side also to adapt to this new model that is coming up.
I really find this discussion very interesting, so I want to thank the organizers for picking the SMAC topic here. And there's a question that's kind of bugging my head, and it's probably for the whole panel, and maybe if anyone wants to add. So there is a rate at which we are adding innovation in this field, and that just rate is beyond comprehension. It's just mind-boggling. It's just an unbelievably cruising speed that we are seeing. Every day there is a news. Every day there is some kind of a collaboration. Every day there is some innovation that's thrown into even before your mind can absorb. So that's that rate at one end. And there's this set of either the clients or the corporates, and we've known all the case studies. With Target, what has happened, eBay, what has happened, PayPal. So are the organizations and let's probably not even talk about the consumers, who are the end users at this point. But are even the big corporates totally prepared today to absorb all the innovation that we're throwing at their end?
I don't think so.
And if not, what's that they can do? I think when you talked about Doug, I think you referred to a little bit of encryption and security measures, and you mentioned the security starts at the head. But what else can we do? What else should they be doing?
So this innovation model, the ability, I've seen a lot of companies now that are moving away from trying to feel big to feeling small. Have you seen that? Where
nimble. They want to be nimble.
They want to be nimble, but what they're trying to do is they're trying to break small groups out and treat them as if they were a startup. And they want them to operate in a startup model where they maybe dress differently, they have different rules, they just don't operate like the corporate environment to allow them to think more innovatively. And those kind of groups are now spawning within large organizations in order to take on platform as a service, software as a service, infrastructure. They're the ones that are kind of testing these models to see what works, what doesn't work, because there is so much coming at them. There has to be a group that can constantly funnel it in and trial it out, right? But they have to think differently, because remember the silo and the gatekeeper, right? That's the paradigm they're living on the enterprise side, but those things can't exist in a startup model where you're constantly having to trial things in it, and you have to fail quickly in order to find out what works.
So how do you still continue to think one step ahead than, you know, if I can use the word predators or intruders that are trying to kind of get to your data or the information that they probably need for their own reasons and own analytics?
Well, I think you're seeing more companies, and we're seeing this. So we work with some organizations in the UK as well, and one of their individuals from the security team was leaving, and they replaced him with 3 individuals. So I think what you're seeing on the cloud side is there's more investment from a budget standpoint to beef up their security teams in order to become maybe not as reliant upon experts externally, but having that internally as well, because of the amount of risk that's involved on that data. Because we all saw what happened with Target, right? And even the C-suite, once that data was breached, you know, huge problem. So I think more and more of the executives are saying, this can affect me if there's a breach in any way, and they're trying to protect themselves by beefing up their security environments.
All right, we've reached our time. I want to be respectful of everyone's schedules. I know that there are still some viewers. I just checked online. We would love to get your feedback as to whether Google Hangout worked, whether you were able to follow the conversation, whether you were able to hear it. And so if those of you still on the line would communicate with us and let us know what your experience was, that would be fantastic. Those of you in the room and on the phone or in the Hangout, what do we even call it? Thank you.
Hangouts on Air is what it's called.
Hangouts on Air.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for those who have joined today. We are looking for ways to increase the network and get more and more people involved. So hopefully the topics that we're picking are getting people interested. And as we plan for the next event, which will happen in the fall, we'll be looking for topics that are of interest. So we're interested from anyone in the membership to let us know what you're looking for the next meeting so that we can start that planning. So again, thanks to our panelists, to Infosys who hosted today, and those of us in the room get to enjoy a networking now and some food, but those on air, thank you for joining, and we'll close the meeting.
Phil.
Wood.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.